What's going on, everybody, and welcome to a NFL Week 5 fantasy preview. It's the first one we're doing, and right now we're doing it for the listeners of AFL. If anybody else wants to tune in, good for them. This is Josh, and I am here tonight with Stokes. What's up, Stokes?
Cheer.
And a new voice to the podcast. He's been on maybe an AFL podcast in the past, but Hadley's with us tonight. What's up, Hadley?
Hey man, just getting ready for the DFS slate.
We are about 12 hours away from kickoff for the 1 p.m. games. We are recording this Sunday morning at almost 1 a.m. Eastern time. So we have 13 games to get through. The Thursday night game has already taken place. Arizona dominated San Francisco and probably ended any starting career Blaine Gabbert will ever have again in the NFL. But that's in the past. Let's talk about what's going to happen later today. And we're going to start with a very intriguing 1 o'clock game. Kicks off as the New England Patriots travel to Cleveland to take on the Browns. The game is in Cleveland. But the story of this game is the return of Tom Brady. He comes off the 4-game suspension. And the biggest thing about this is everybody's expecting that the Patriots are just going to roll with Brady back, but the injury report isn't very kind. Julian Edelman is a true game-time decision. Seems like he's probably trending toward playing, but definitely want to check that before kickoff. Those will come out around 11:30 Eastern time. Gronk is also probably going to play, but if you've been paying attention to Gronk the last couple weeks that he has been playing, he's been primarily a run blocker in their 2 tight end sets, and it's been Bennett getting a lot of their receiving action. So, again, you want to check that as the inactives come out around 11:30. LeGarrette Blount has been limited this week with a hip, but he's also trending toward playing. For the Browns, Corey Coleman's still out, and they don't really have any injuries beyond that. Obviously, Josh McCown and RG3 are not going to play. Cody Kessler is still running point for the Browns. Hadley, what sticks out to you about this game?
It's definitely where you're going to take a stand on Tom Brady. You going in with him, obviously if you have him in your season long, you're probably going to fire him up unless you somehow got into someone better. But DFS is going to be interesting. He's going to be highly owned in a game where there's such a big favorite. Like, we could see a blunt game here. Personally, I don't know if I'm going there in DFS tournaments tomorrow.
Stokes, what stands out to you about this game?
I think that in this game in particular, it's either going to be Brady's going to go off or he's not going to do much of anything. I think it'll either be he's going to go for 304 or 5 touchdowns, or Blunt is going to have 150 and 2 or 3 touchdowns. I like I like James White for some reason. I think that when Brady's out there, if he is going to have a good game, he likes to utilize the short routes with the running backs. And if Edelman is out, I think that James White would be an even better option.
I think there's 2 worlds we live in this game. There's the season-long leagues that Hadley was referring to, and also the daily leagues. And I'm going to start with season-long. Like Hadley said, if you have Brady, you're playing Brady because you drafted him to be your starting quarterback. And unless you drafted Derek Carr as a complement, there's really not a realistic quarterback where you could sit here and look at the matchups this week and question whether you should start. Derek Carr has an attractive matchup. Maybe you debate it, but I'm guessing if you've been waiting this long for Tom Brady, you're going to play this juicy matchup against the Browns. Edelman and Gronk, you drafted them in season long high enough that if they're playing, you have to roll with them. Unless you just lucked into guys like Marvin Jones at receiver and Terrell Pryor, who's also in this game we can talk about. I don't see a scenario where you can leave Edelman out of your lineup if he's playing. And Gronk, you probably took him in the first round if he's on your team, unless you drafted late enough in the season that the injury was out. So now maybe you're in a situation where you drafted Gronk and you handcuffed him with Bennett. I have a situation like that in one league, and I'm actually going to play Bennett, I think, just because I'm not going to let Gronk screw me again. This could be a huge Gronk game, but I think Bennett's going to be involved enough, even if Gronk is fully healthy, full go, that Bennett's not going to put a 0 out there. I think the value in this game for the Patriots actually comes from the lesser-known guys. Stokes mentioned James White. I think he's a fantastic option because when Brady does play, Blunt's numbers do tend to go down, and I think White could be a lot more involved in the passing game. I love Chris Hogan in this game. They made an aggressive move to get him this offseason. He's a downfield threat that hasn't been really a part of their offense in the first 4 weeks with Garoppolo and Brissett, but Brady's going to take advantage of that. I think Chris Hogan might score a touchdown or two this week. I'm starting him in 2 different leagues and in daily. And then from the Browns standpoint, I mean, Crowell you have to play just because of volume, but I think this could be a Duke Johnson game if they're down by a lot. Duke Johnson has 15 targets the last 2 games with Cody Kessler. He wasn't getting those targets as much with RG3 and McCown, but Kessler's been looking to the back. Outside of that, Terrell Pryor, are you starting? Is Gary Barnidge playing in this game? Are you starting him? I guess you have to because they're going to be down and throwing. But outside of that, I'm not looking at a whole lot of Browns. So, any other thoughts on this game, Hadley?
Definitely Crowell. I mean, he's playing really good football right now. I would have brushed him aside as a mediocre back before the season, but I mean, he hasn't had one game with less than 5 yards per carry, and he's getting the ball a lot. I mean, I guess Hugh Jackson really likes this guy because they're feeding him the rock, and he's getting it done. It's weird. The spread is 10.5. 86% of the public is on the Patriots, and it hasn't moved at all from the open. So you don't have the reverse line movement, but usually you have 86% on one side. They should have raised the spread there. So something a little fishy is going on with that line there.
Stokes, what do you think about Hadley's point earlier about maybe avoiding the Patriots in daily, only because they're going to be so popular? And if Brady's in so many lineups in, say, a tournament, maybe you start a different quarterback, and if Brady has a clunker or just a game that's below his expectations, all of a sudden you have a big advantage over the other people in that tournament.
Yes, absolutely. I think the same way with Terrell Pryor in this game. I think that with the way he's been playing over the last couple of weeks, people are going to continue to try and roster him, and I think that Belichick, he sees a team's best threat or option, and he does what he can to limit them or neutralize that particular player. So I think that Belichick will take Terrell Pryor out of the game. And as far as Brady is concerned, I probably would not put him in any DFS lineups because, as Had said, he's going to be highly owned because people are expecting him to go for the throat because he's coming back off of the suspension.
And I know it's a juicy matchup, and I know Tom Brady has been superhuman at times, but you have to remember it's been it's been an entire offseason plus a month of the regular season plus very limited preseason action. There could be some natural rust here for Tom Brady here in Week 5. So that's a look at the Pats and the Browns, and we are going to move on to the Philadelphia Eagles and the Detroit Lions, another 1 p.m. kickoff. This game is in the comfortable confines indoors, so you don't have to worry about weather. For the Eagles, Zach Ertz is back in the lineup this week. And for the Lions, it's a mash unit out there. Eric Ebron's out. Marvin Jones should play. He was full practice on Friday, but does have a foot issue. You're always nervous when you see something going on with a foot. Ziggy Ansah and DeAndre Levy are out on defense, which could open up a lot of holes on defense. On offense, I should say, for the Philadelphia Eagles playmakers. And a side note, Jim Bob Cooter, the offensive coordinator for the Detroit Lions, has pledged to get Golden Tate the ball this week. Stokes, are you excited about Golden Tate?
I am. I'm more so than Marvin Jones if he was healthy. I think that the Eagles' defensive front, their pass rush, gets in there pretty quick. So I would expect that the passing game is more to be toward the short passing, the quick routes to get Golden Tate the ball. So I would, if it was a pick'em, I would take Golden Tate over Marvin Jones in this game.
Hadley, what are your thoughts overall in this game?
I mean, first of all, the ridiculous take by Stokes. I mean, Golden Tate is catching the ball at the line of scrimmage and then getting tackled right away. I mean, that's about all he's good for right now. The over under is at 46 from what I see right now, and that's what I have as the open and the live projection. Even though 72% of the public's on the over, so I don't think that Vegas expects this game to shoot out quite like some people might think. I initially thought maybe Stafford would be a good contrarian play, but I mean, you see that, and just I mean. So far, you got to give it up to Philadelphia's defense. I mean, the pass rush is getting after it, and the corners are kind of a ragtag group, but with the pass rush, they're getting it done.
The thing about Philadelphia is Carson Wentz is getting all the attention, but it's their defense that's really dominating. Jim Schwartz has that wide nine defense, and their defensive line is one of the more talented units in the league. I think Carson Wentz is a trendy play this week, especially if you're one of the teams that maybe you have Cam Newton and he's going to be out this week, or you have Drew Brees on a bye and you're looking for a fill-in. Carson Wentz is a guy that a lot of people are picking up, and he's a trendy DFS play. I'm not going there. I haven't been. I mean, I've been impressed with what he's done, but I don't feel like this is necessarily something that's going to have sustained success. Obviously, the Lions are without Ansah and without Levy this weekend, but I just feel like Carson Wentz at some point is going to play like the rookie that all of the scouts thought he was going to be. And this might be this week 4, week 5 time period where defenses start to catch up with him. There's a lot more film out on him now. You can start to see the strengths and weaknesses. I think they're going to try to run the ball. I don't think Detroit's going to be able to put up a lot of points on them, so there's not going to be a big reason for Carson Wentz to be throwing it all over the yard. I do love Zach Ertz in this game, though. The Lions have never been able to cover the tight end, it seems. They give up the second most fantasy points to tight ends of teams in the NFL, so I think Ertz is a great option this week. I think if you have Jordan Matthews, you got to keep riding that as long as you can, as long as he's being productive. I'd probably try to stay away from the Eagles running backs this week. It seems like a jumbled mess to me. I know Ryan Matthews is probably the guy, but they really like Darren Sproles. They're going to try to get Smallwood, the rookie, more involved, as he really impressed last week with Matthews out. So to me, that just screams running back by committee. And for the Lions running backs, Hadley, it's been a mash unit, and it started off with Theo Riddick dominating week 1, and now he's the last man standing. But I don't think Theo Riddick's a feature running back. I think he's a third down back that when asked to do more just can't live up to the hype.
Yeah, I mean, count me in as one of the dopes that had Dwayne Washington in their lineup getting, I think it was about 1.9 points before he went out with an injury. So that was tough. Theo Riddick's he's not a good running back. He's, a little slot receiver masquerading as a running back. When he runs between the tackles, he's terrible. The offensive line, meh. I mean, just nothing really on the Lions side. I mean, if you want to take a shot on Marvin Jones, probably going to be low owned this week. Sure, I can see it in a tournament, but that's about it for me on the Lions side.
Yeah, I don't see a lot of room to run for the Lions. I think you have a weak offensive line going up against a dominant defensive line. Stokes, is there anybody in this game that we haven't mentioned that you like, or that we have mentioned that you would disagree with?
No, not at all. Other than my ridiculous take, loving Golden Tate. So, yeah.
I'll have to agree with Hadley on that one. I can't at this point in time do anything with Golden Tate other than leave him on my bench, and there's no way I'm putting him in DFS. I haven't even looked at his value this week because that's how far from my mind is. I can't imagine he's that great of a value even. To me, he has to prove something to me. I know the offensive coordinator says they want to get him more involved. I know Ebron's out and Jones is hurt, and the recipe in this game when they're down screams for someone like Tate to produce, but he's just been so miserable, and some people, especially if they drafted in the middle of the summer, probably drafted him as their wide receiver too, and it's been brutal. Let's move on to the Indianapolis Colts and the Chicago Bears. This game is in Indianapolis, so it's another game that's indoors. This game could have plenty of points, even though the Chicago Bears are going to be down quite a few weapons. Eddie Royal doesn't look to be playing this game. Kevin White's obviously out. Jeremy Langford's still injured. That means Jordan Howard gets the start. For the Colts, they're still playing without Dante Moncrief, so Philip Dorsett gets the start on offense. And, obviously Jay Cutler isn't playing, which means Brian Hoyer is going to get the start. So all those names out, but Hadley, this game to me still projects to be kind of a shootout based on the defenses that are playing.
Yeah, the only thing that worries me a bit is I believe this is the first time that a team has gone to London and not gotten a bye after that. So we're kind of wondering how a team's going to deal with that transition. It's going to be interesting to see. I still like the Colts' offensive attack in this game, and by that I mean their passing attack. I'm not rostering old man Frank Gore. T.Y. Hilton, great play. Probably going to be a little bit overlooked by the masses, so you're going to get a nice ownership on him and just ridiculous upside in this matchup.
And Stokes with Eddie Royal and Kevin White down, and Alshon Jeffrey, he's not 100%, probably not going to be 100% all year long. He's been limited practice, but he should be fine to go. There's a receiver, Cameron Meredith, on the Bears that's going to start opposite Jeffrey. Is he a guy you'd give consideration to in DFS, or probably not unless you were just putting two studs in there and just had to fill out your roster?
I would. It would only be an emergency situation. I would not put him in there on purpose. It'd be like, well, I don't have enough money to do what I want, so here's a guy who's going to start. But I like Brian Hoyer in this game. I think that the Bears are going to pass enough for him to put up the stats he's been putting up. He's had back-to-back 300-yard games, and I think for his price over FanDuel and DraftKings, I think he's going to be worth it. I think he'll pay you back if you put him in your roster.
I like Zach Miller a lot in this game. Alshon Jeffrey's probably going to get shadowed by Vontae Davis, who does do a good job when matched up against number one receivers. Obviously, you'd have to keep Alshon Jeffrey in your lineup. The guy he puts up numbers regardless of quarterback, regardless of matchup, but just something to keep in mind. I think Jordan Howard's going to have another big week, and a lot of people that watched him in college and watched Langford last year said Howard was the better running back, so I wouldn't be surprised if Howard keeps that job even when Langford comes back. Philip Dorsett, to me, is a poor man's Deshaun Jackson at this point. He's not as involved in the offense as a lot of people were hoping when Moncrief went down. He's more of a 2, 3, 4 catch-a-game guy who might take one to the house, and that's obviously valuable, but it's just hard to count on. And I'll disagree with Hadley on Frank Gore. I know he's not exciting. He's not going to break off any 60-yard touchdown runs, but he gets volume, and he's involved in a high-powered offense. He's been, I think, a top 15 running back this year in most formats, and in this game projected to get a lot of points. I think he's the guy you could put in as your RB2, and he's probably going to get you 60, 70 rushing yards, a couple catches, and maybe pop one in for a touchdown. And with Andrew Luck, I think you feel pretty good about him. Andrew Luck is obviously expensive in DFS, so maybe that's not a guy that you would target if you're looking to save money at quarterback, but I could see a big game from Luck in here. Anything else you guys want to touch on in this matchup?
You want to go first, Stokes?
No, go ahead.
All right. I just want to say, like, Hoyer, I'm not sure I see the upside for tournaments. John Fox, just traditionally a boring, conservative coach. If they're keeping it close, I see a lot of running. I like Jordan Howard in the game still. Ownership might be a little bit of a concern, but when you have a fairly low-priced running back that's guaranteed like all the work, it's tough to get away from that. Frank Gore, he's fine for your season-long leagues. I'm thinking more like I don't see any case where he's like on a tournament-winning team type thing. Jeffrey, too banged up for me in DFS season-long. You probably got to go there. You probably don't have better options. And Meredith, the only thing I want to say there, I believe there was 17 snaps after Kevin White went out with injury, and he played all 17. So he's going to be in there, and he's minimum priced on both sites. Like, if you're having a tough time getting some of those higher priced guys in, that might be a guy that you throw in at wide receiver 3, just hope he gets in the end zone or something like that,
It's definitely a strategy. Load up on a few studs, and then you got to sprinkle in some hopes and prayers in there. And he's a guy that probably at least qualifies as a somewhat educated hope and prayer this week. Stokes, final thoughts on this game?
I don't have any other than I've obviously, as I stated, I do like Brian Hoyer. For some reason, I've been avoiding T.Y. Hilton all year, and I don't know why because he's crazy productive. But for some reason, I just been anti Ty all year.
His production actually, I mean, this shouldn't be surprising because I mean, it does make sense. His production really went up when Moncrief went out, and I think a lot of people thought that coverage would draw to Hilton and then Dorsett would eat, but it's really been Hilton that's benefited, and Dorsett's been more of a kind of a one-trick deep threat pony. I think this is, from a non-fantasy perspective, this is a huge game for Indy. If they lose this game, they fall to 1-4. They lose a home game to a bad team starting a backup quarterback. You could just see that season starting to crumble for the Indianapolis Colts. There's going to be some pressure on people in Indianapolis to get it done this week. It's going to be interesting to see what happens. Guys, a game that's going to be also interesting for some pretty devastating reasons is the Tennessee Titans travel to Miami to take on the Miami Dolphins, 1 p.m. kickoff. The overwhelming story for this game is what's going on in Florida with the hurricane. It's absolutely tragic. Obviously, anybody, if you're listening and you're down in that area, you got family in that area, we all have our thoughts and prayers with them. But from a fantasy perspective, which almost seems cruel to bring up, let's just talk about some injuries here. Arian Foster doesn't look like he's going to come back this week. He's doubtful for the game. Jordan Cameron is out. Doesn't seem to be many injuries from the Titans standpoint that would be noteworthy. Stokes, thoughts on this game, knowing that it could be played in a torrential downpour?
I would be against any and everyone in the game, unless I saw the forecast and it was nothing but sunny. I'd probably. I mean, the only person I would want to put in the game is just to have Jarvis Landry because he's going to get the targets, he's going to get the catches, and that's about the only guy I would really trust in this game if it wasn't a downpour.
Hadley, what are your thoughts?
For sure, Jarvis Landry. Him and going back to T.Y. Hilton, I believe I heard that him and T.Y. Hilton are the only two receivers that have double-digit targets in every game so far this year. So it just gives you an idea how involved they are in their offense there. And then the other play is DeMarco Murray. I mean, I shout out to myself being completely wrong on him earlier in the off season. I didn't think that he would have this feature role, but look, if they're ahead, they're running the ball with him. If they're behind, he's involved in the passing game. So you got to take a look at DeMarco Murray.
I agree with everything you guys just said. I think you have to play DeMarco Murray because he's been so productive. I think you have to play your studs. I think the studs in this game are DeMarco Murray and Jarvis Landry. You temper your expectations, understanding the situation, but you're probably not in a position, especially in season long, where you can set these guys. And like Hadley said, DeMarco Murray, game flow-wise, is going to be involved, whether they're ahead or behind. Let me throw this name out there to you guys. Delanie Walker. You know Marcus Mariota loves throwing to him, especially last year. The numbers haven't been crazy good this year. Had kind of an underwhelming game last week, but he's going to be in there. If you drafted him, you probably drafted him pretty high, probably the third or fourth tight end off the board in your draft. Do you play Delanie Walker this week? I'll start with you, Hadley.
Definitely in season long. I can see a case in DFS. Let me just double check his price here on FanDuel. I mean, it's not terrible, right? Like, you got Jordan Reed that's more expensive by a good amount, and you'll have some people that'll play Gronkowski. By the way, Bennett is the play going back to that. It's not Gronk this week still, I think. Mm-hmm. So you got Reed and Gronkowski that are more expensive than Delanie on FanDuel by a good amount. And then same thing on DraftKings, except like I'd say it's a little bit more of a discount for Delanie there. So you can take a shot on Delanie in some DFS lineups. And definitely I think you have to go there in season long. I don't see who you could start above him.
What do you think about Walker this week, Stokes?
Obviously I would start him in season long because I would have drafted him in like the first 10 rounds, I assume. So I would start him, and in DFS, I think that he's cheap enough to want to use him because I would expect him to get the volume because as you stated, Mariota likes to throw to him. So I would use him in both.
So the takeaway from this, if you're listening for this game, is play your studs in season long. Don't force anybody into the lineup in daily. But I do have one sneaky daily play for you. If you're looking for a cheap defense, I kind of like the Titans defense this week because Miami has a horrendous offensive line. Tannehill is always slow to get rid of the ball. The Dolphins are always one of the most sacked teams out there, and he's also mistake prone. So I don't expect a lot of points in this game. So that's why I wouldn't necessarily want to play the Dolphins defense because they're just going to run the ball continuously, which takes away the chances for sacks and interceptions. But I could see the Titans getting a couple sacks and interceptions. So that's a look at that game. And let's move on to the Minnesota Vikings hosting the Houston Texans. Vikings are a powerhouse this year, especially on defense. But they're going to be without one of their best offensive playmakers this week, as Stefon Diggs is doubtful. For the Texans, the biggest name out for this game is J.J. Watt, but he was out last week. He's going to be out for probably the rest of the season. Guys, with the Minnesota Vikings, you're almost getting to the territory. Now we've seen this for 4 weeks, where we're at with Seattle of years past, Denver last year, where now you almost have to downgrade everybody in the offense that they're playing because they have been so suffocating. Stokes, are you getting to that point with teams going against the Vikings?
Yes, absolutely, because they have great defense, and I mean, at home they've been playing wonderfully. That being said, it would be really hard to not use Nuke coming off the game he just had, and I'm going to be against Lamar though, considering the defense. But I would consider using Nuke. I would not consider using Fuller though, and obviously nobody's going to use Osweiler.
Now, just for clarification, when Stokes says he's against Lamar, if he drafted, you're talking about daily, right? You're not talking about
Yes, daily. Yeah, if this is season long, I don't think you have any better options than Lamar, or you might have better options than Fuller, but you're not going to sit Nuke under any circumstances. It doesn't really matter who he's facing.
All right, Hadley, let's talk about this game for a second. One thing I think is getting overblown about this great Vikings defense is how dominant Xavier Rhodes has been. He's not a shadow corner. I think he's getting more credit than he deserves. I'm not scared of starting DeAndre Hopkins against anybody, and in particular Xavier Rhodes. If I am, it's because of the defense, not because of him. I actually kind of like Hopkins this week for DFS. I know he's expensive, but I think I'm going to be one of the only people with him in my lineup, and I think he's too good to be held down for so long. But his quarterback is a problem. What are your thoughts on this game?
Man, I can't go there with you at all. And it's not only Xavier Rhodes. If you take a look on PFF, they also have Terrence Newman graded pretty highly. He's the 27th ranked cornerback, 79 overall, I guess you might call it, for his player grade. And that's comparable on the other side to Will Fuller, who has a 78.8 so far this season. So Terrence Newman, stepped into the fountain of youth or whatever's going on there. So he's doing well on the other side. I believe Xavier Rhodes' stat that I heard quoted on a podcast is he's actually allowing a 0 quarterback rating when targeted. And, I mean, you might not respect them, but the quarterbacks are respecting them because they're barely throwing his way, and when they are, it's not working out for them.
And then with the Stefon Diggs injury, because he's been Bradford's go-to guy, although in recent weeks it's become Kyle Rudolph. Who's the beneficiary of that this week, Stokes? You think it's just going to be more for Rudolph, or you think they're going to continue what they tried a little bit last week, which is actually getting Cordarrelle Patterson more involved in the offense?
I think that's most likely what they're going to do, just try those gadget things. I know during that game with the Giants, they tried to get Thielen involved in the game, so I think they might try that a little bit more, use him as the token white guy in the past game situation. So without Diggs, that's really going to hamper the offense, and they already don't have Adrian Peterson, so this is going to be, I expect a low-scoring game for sure.
Hadley, the Vikings don't have a good offensive line. They obviously don't have Adrian Peterson. They're playing without their best receiver in Diggs. You and I had conversations earlier this week, and I was debating not even playing the Texans' defense because of the Watt injury and Vikings being at home. But you talked me out of it. I kept him in my lineup, and I'm thinking at this point in time you're right because there's just not a lot of weapons on the Vikings' offense that scare you at this point, and I'm not scared of the quarterback either.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like the Texans, they're kind of, I don't know. I don't want to say middle of the road because they are still in the top 10 for DVOA on Football Outsiders. But there's been some decent running back games out of opposing running backs against the Texans this year. So I mean that's kind of interesting. Maybe if you're looking at like Jerick McKinnon, maybe. But the thing with him is, they still love to throw in Matt Asiata for his, 1 yard per carry at the 1 yard line, which is just, the most tilting thing ever. So McKinnon's upside is just so capped because of that Asiata play, if you will. I'd stay away from Rudolph actually too, even though he's been targeted a lot. You can look at it on DraftKings right now. You'll see a big red number next to him because Houston is number 3 against the tight end on DraftKings, and I believe they have a history going back to last year where they shut down the tight end pretty good. Plus, now you got no Stephon Diggs. Like, who the hell do they have to stop? Kyle Rudolph. They're gonna stop him.
I like McKinnon catching more passes out of the backfield this week, even more than usual. He's pretty useful as far as a PPR play anyway, but with Diggs being out and, like you said, the added attention for Kyle Rudolph, I think McKinnon gets a little more involved in the passing game this week. But yes, the Matt Asiata factor of being the goal line back is pretty frustrating. And do you guys consider, I'll start with you, Hadley, Patterson, or how do you pronounce it, Adam Thielen or Thielen, or do you consider either one of those guys DFS plays, or would that just be a hope and a prayer?
No, I mean, I guess you can, luck out where Patterson gets like a return touchdown and then somehow gets a receiving touchdown too, and then he gets you some big winnings there. But I mean, that's just that to me. That's a donk play. McKinnon, he's a pretty good play on DraftKings despite the Asiata worries. Just because, like I said, Houston not too strong against the running back, and he just has such a low price tag on DraftKings, so it's going to be hard to pass up.
And Stokes, you said that Hopkins and Miller have to be in your lineup if you took them in season long. What about Will Fuller? Because he's a guy that you probably drafted at least low enough in your draft that he was a fringe starter, but he's been much more than that as the season rolls on. Is he a must start in season long this week, or are you looking at other options if you have him?
I would give him the heads up over another fringe wide receiver because he's got the speed, and if he's going to be covered by Terrence Newman, I think that although Newman has played well, I think he can still get beat deep. And he gave up a pass interference penalty at the 1 yard line last week because he got beat deep, and I think that Will Fuller can take advantage of that if the opportunity arises. But going back to the question you asked, Hadley, whether I would use Patterson or Thielen, I'd use, if I had to, I'd use Meredith over both of them. So because the Bears game is going to be higher scoring, in this game I would anticipate a much lower score. So I wouldn't use either of them. I'd use another guy. But that's back to your question regarding Fuller. If I had another wide receiver 3 that was in a better matchup, probably, but I could see myself using Fuller as well.
So the tone from this game is don't force any Vikings or Texans into your lineup. Play your obvious studs, but otherwise try to avoid this game if you can. Although both of these defenses should be pretty good plays, especially Minnesota. They have been lights out.
There's something that could be said to using Hopkins in this situation because most people are going to anticipate that the defense is going to shut him down, and if he goes off against this defense, then I mean you're ahead of most.
He's not priced low enough yet, though, right? I mean, like Will Fuller has been the one putting up the numbers all year, and it's still, you still have to pay the high price tag on Hopkins, and Fuller's cheap. If you want to go with Fuller, I can't be too mad. I believe using the shoulder pad tracking technology, they put in a chip or whatever to track players' speed. Will Fuller was the fastest recorded player last week, I believe, at 22 miles per hour. So, I mean, you guys got jets.
That's not that fast. I can go much faster than that in my car. As far, I forget where I was going to go now with this game.
The kickers are in play, by the way. So there's your kicker take for FanDuel, especially Novak. Novak has double-digit fantasy points in every game so far because they stall out a lot. Mm-hmm. So a lot of people think you want to target like a high-scoring team, but extra points get you 1 point. What you want is field goals from your field goal kicker on FanDuel, and you have an offense like the Texans that, they move the ball a little bit, but they kind of stall out in the red zone. He gets you the field goals.
And then to wrap up the Hopkins point, this is where I was going to go. The reason I like Hopkins, Hadley brings up a good point. You're not getting any kind of financial savings on him. He's still going to be one of the top 4 or 5 priced receivers out there. You're getting the contrarian value because at this point in time, everybody's looking at his dollars and saying, well, that's really expensive for a guy that's not putting up a lot of points so far and who's going against Minnesota. So I think the value is you'll be the only one have him in your lineup probably, or one of the few, and if he goes off, then you're going to benefit. But there's a reason why you're the only one that would have him in your lineup, because the odds of him going off with the current situation in Houston and the fact that they're playing in Minnesota is not very high. I do like the point you made about the kickers. It's very tempting to always roll out a kicker that plays for the Saints or plays for the Colts, even though Vinatieri is obviously very solid. But there's a reason why Justin Tucker is always one of the most productive kickers in the league, because Joe Flacco gets to the red zone and just wilts. So let's move on to the Washington Redskins at the Baltimore Ravens. Speaking of Justin Tucker, there's some injuries here we can talk about. It looks like Josh Norman's going to play. He had a full practice on Friday. He's off the injury report. Also Trent Williams, which is good for the Washington Redskins offense, off the injury report. Defensively, the Redskins could be without Ryan Kerrigan. He did have a full practice on Friday, but he is questionable. You're not going to be scared of the Redskins defense with or without Kerrigan. Norman's the name to watch. He's off the injury report, so keep that in mind. Josh Doxson, the rookie receiver, is out of this game. Good news for Baltimore. They get rookie running back Kenneth Dixon this week. He should go. He is questionable, but he had a full practice on Friday. Expect him to debut. The fact that they cut Justin Forsett midweek is a sign that he's probably going to play, although with the game Terrence West had last week, Hadley, I wouldn't expect it to be the Kenneth Dixon show anytime soon.
Yeah, I mean, it should still be Terrence West. He's in play on both sides. I mean, obviously, Washington run defense still terrible. If you click the name on DraftKings right now, you're going to see 30th ranked against running backs. So, I mean, they're giving it up to the running back. Terrence West definitely in play. I don't expect Kenneth Dixon to take on too big a role. This is his first game in, so I guess we'll have to see. But he's also listed at questionable, as you mentioned, so I don't see how he comes in with a big workload. I do want to recommend Deshaun Jackson. I like him a lot this week. He's probably going to get matched up with our friend Sharice Wright, who likes to give it up. He's the one that got burned for all 3 Michael Crabtree touchdowns. So you like to see that.
And I also remember Corey Coleman had a huge game against this Ravens secondary. They struggle with speed. Crabtree's not a blazer, but they are a slow secondary out there. Stokes, when you look at this matchup, does anything jump off the page to you?
I like Terrence West, obviously, based on the things that Hadley said. That is really it for me. I really don't like Deshaun Jackson. I understand the Sharice Wright factor, but at that price, I probably would go with a different wide receiver. I don't like either of the quarterbacks in this game. I hate Kirk Cousins as a player, and I don't think Flacco is all that anymore, or if he ever was. I like Jordan Reed though, because no matter what's going on in anything, he just gets thrown at because that's Cousins loves him. Um, but, but a lot of people know that about Jordan.
Jordan Reed had a big game last week against Cleveland. Finally got in the end zone, scored twice actually. I'm glad Stokes brought up the quarterback, because I want to kick this around to both of you. So, with Cam Newton being injured this week, with Carson Palmer being injured this week, Drew Brees being on a bye, there's going to be some people out there that need help at quarterback, and both Flacco and Cousins are in that QB2 conversation, and if your league is going a certain way, you might have to consider starting one or both of these guys. So, you can either tell me if one of these guys jumps out to you, if you would avoid both. My opinion on this is, if I had to start one of these guys, I'd go with Kirk Cousins. Derek Carr shredded this secondary last week. Yes, I realize the obvious follow-up to this is Derek Carr is much more talented than Kirk Cousins, but Cousins has been quietly productive this season. Through 4 games, he's either thrown for 300 yards or multiple touchdowns in all 4 games. That's fantasy gold. He's getting the Blake Bortles treatment this year also, where his defense is so bad it forces him to throw, and their running game is not productive. Matt Jones and that running game, not productive at all. Jones is interesting this week because he gets a lot of volume, so he'll have opportunity, but the Ravens' run D is tough. But sticking with quarterbacks in general, if I had to choose one of these guys, I like Cousins. I also like the Deshaun Jackson point. I think he gets in the end zone this week. I can't trust Flacco. I know it looks like a juicy matchup with the Redskins being down some secondary members. D'Angelo Hall went out last week. He's been playing well at safety. But to me, Flacco is just a guy that, even in a nice-looking matchup, I can't trust. I know Steve Smith is starting to come on, and after a slow start, he's had 22 targets the last 2 weeks, and Mike Wallace had a nice start to the season, and Dennis Pitta looks like he might be regaining some of his form from a couple years ago. But with all that being said, for me, I'll always look for a better option than Joe Flacco. Hadley, what are your thoughts on these quarterbacks?
Yeah, I don't like it. Like I said, Deshaun Jackson and Terrace West are my plays. I'm actually coming on to Jordan Reed a little bit, phrasing a little poor on my part there, but basically I thought he was going to be high owned after he went off last week, but it looks like if you take a look at Fantasy Aces, it's maybe like the 3rd most popular DFS site now, or maybe 4th behind Yahoo and obviously DK and FanDuel. Those are the only guys that we can get Thursday percentage owned numbers for, and he's behind like people that he should not be behind. He was 4.99% owned in the Fantasy Aces GPP tournament that started on Thursday running through Monday, the main one. And you got, of course, Zach Ertz, most owned. He's not going to be sneaky with that Lions trash tight end defense that we covered earlier. And then, guys like Martellus Bennett are up there, which they should be. But then, I mean, people are owning Hunter Henry when it looks like Antonio Gates is coming back. We'll see what happens there. Cameron Braid is up there. Kyle Rudolph, we talked about how I don't really like that matchup. I mean, if you can get Jordan Reed, less than 10% a week after he just blew up, I mean, that's nice.
One guy we should talk about on Washington is Jamison Crowder. He started off the season strong, but his targets have slowly gone down, and he was 2 catches for 21 yards last week, even in a matchup where, I mean, it's not even that attractive of a matchup, despite the fact that Derek Carr did go nuts last week. You might be thinking, I could get another Redskins receiver in there. I wouldn't touch him. I wouldn't put him in there. And to wrap up my very first point, Kenneth Dixon, I don't expect it to be this week for him, but if you're in season long and you have a deep enough bench, I'd put him on there because the Ravens love him. And Terrence West, while he did have a big game last week against the Raiders, I don't know if over the rest of the season if he can maintain that, and I think that Kenneth Dixon's a guy they're going to try to get more and more involved. So, Stokes, any final thoughts on this matchup?
No. If I had to choose one of the quarterbacks, I would choose Cousins as much as I hate him. I think that his weapons are better than Joe Flacco's, and I think that he's a more accurate thrower of the football than Joe Flacco. So, I mean, based on the ability to complete more passes, or complete better passes, and to better weapons, I would choose Cousins over Flacco.
I'll back Stokes up on that.
Okay. So we all vote Cousins over Flacco if you had to pick one of those. One more
But
question.
I picked up Hoyer instead of Cousins.
So what we're saying is don't fall in love with any of these quarterbacks, but if you have to play one, play Cousins. Hadley, what do you think about Dennis Petta? He's a guy that nobody really had on their radar before the season started. He had a couple of big games in there. It looks like he's a bigger part of the offense. You know Flacco's going to look for him. Is he a guy that is approaching every week starter status and season long if you don't have a Gronk, a Reed, or an Olsen?
Yeah, I mean he's gonna get looks. Flacco trusts him. Pretty down week, which was disappointing. I had him a little bit last week in DFS for sure because Oakland's been trash against the tight end for 2 years now. But down week for him there. He's usually gonna get you at least 5 catches and I don't know, maybe like 50 yards or something like that. 10 points from your tight end when you didn't get one of those elite guys. I mean, you'll take that and move on to the next. He's averaging 11 on DK scoring, which is PPR, right? So, I mean, it's possible for sure.
All right, guys, let's move on to the New York Jets at the Pittsburgh Steelers. Another 1 p.m. kickoff. This game is in Pittsburgh. No Eric Decker this week and probably for the next couple of weeks. Quincy Enunwa, who is going to take his place in the lineup, is questionable, but he is looking like he's trending to play. Matt Forte is also trending to play, but he's banged up. He's dealing with knee injuries and rib injuries, so you could see more Bilal Powell this week. And from the Pittsburgh standpoint, it looks like they're pretty healthy. They got Le'Veon Bell last week, Stokes, and he looked like he hasn't missed a beat.
He's the best running back in football. He for fantasy purposes, he is exactly what you'd want. He's more than involved in the passing game, and he's a great patient runner. I think he's matchup proof because of the fact that he catches so many passes. So I would have no qualms with you could put the entire offense in your lineup and you could be comfortable with it. So I love it.
Yeah, it's so strange because you almost have to go back to like a 99 Rams or maybe the Colts when they had Harrison and Edgerrin James to have a team in the league where you look at it and like your number one running back is on their team and your number one receiver is on their team, and it may not even be close.
Yes, I mean Antonio Brown, he's otherworldly with his skill set. So despite his clunker against the Bengals, but that was in the pouring rain. So I mean, other than that, he's just been dominant, and there's no reason to think that anyone is going to stop these guys consistently week in and week out.
Hadley, we know how good Le'Veon Bell is. We know how good Antonio Brown is. Who else on this Pittsburgh offense should we be looking out for?
I think it's a good week to take Sammy Coates. He doesn't have the size of Martavis Bryant, but he's kind of their deep target right now. I didn't get the number, but I do know, or at least I think I know, it was quoted to me that Sammy Coates has the most receptions of 40 or more yards in the whole league. So just telling you about the type of deep threat that he's been so far. He's going to catch, probably only like 3 passes, but they might go for 90 yards, and hopefully he gets in the end zone for you there. And then the good news is he's also playing the Jets, who on the defensive side have allowed the most 40-yard receptions with 7 so far this year. So you love that. And I actually have a few hot takes for this game, which would start with I don't know how you justify paying that price for Antonio Brown in daily. Like, I mean, he pretty much has to have the Julio game, for you to regret having him. I mean, you look at last week, he gets on the board twice, right? The 2 touchdowns. He finished with 22 points. You're paying nearly $10,000, out of your salary on both sites for this guy. Like, you want to try and get at least 3 times their salary amount. It's lower for the studs versus the value plays. Your value plays you usually want to have maybe 4 or 5 times, but like, how is Antonio Brown gonna pay off this salary? He needs to have a ridiculous game. And I mean, I don't know. I don't think I can go there in daily.
What do you think of
He's in,
Roethlisberger in daily?
I still like Roethlisberger because again, like Antonio Brown can have a really nice game, but not make you regret fading him. And then Big Ben can also spread it around to Sammy Coates. He can get Le'Veon Bell involved in the passing game. He can throw in some Jesse James for a touchdown, maybe 2 touchdowns. You never know. And yeah, Big Ben. The Jets' passing defense is awful. So
Stokes,
like Ben Bet.
Stokes, did you have a thought on the Antonio Brown thing? I think I cut you off.
no, I was just gonna say he's in the business of ridiculous performances. But I mean, last week that was a product of the Chiefs just being absolutely terrible. But obviously the stats are the stats. I understand what you're saying. You need a ridiculous game for the ridiculous price. But if there's one person that is worth it, statistically, Antonio Brown has been the guy. And as previously stated, the Jets' pass defense is just bad. But the thing about Big Ben is while he does force it to Antonio Brown some of the time, he's not willing to do it all the time. And in the red zone situation, you could see a ball go to Jesse James, as you said, or just a little screen or under route to someone else. So, I mean, I understand what you're saying. I probably, if I was putting my lineups together, I would have trouble putting $10,000 just on Antonio Brown. But you know, that's about as low a floor as you'd think with the stud though.
Well, guys, we talked about Pittsburgh. Obviously, if you're in season long, you're playing Ben, you're playing Bell, you're playing Brown. You're obviously probably playing Coates at this point. Jesse James is interesting because he doesn't get a lot of targets in this passing game. They've actually gone consistently down since week 1. He's gone 7, 5, 4, and then 2 last week. He's very touchdown dependent, but he has been finding the end zone so far, so maybe you ride that wave while you can. Let's talk about the team on the other side of the field because they have talent. Eric Decker is out. But they've shown some spurts this year. They had a big game week 2 in Buffalo where it looked like they were clicking on all cylinders. Forte is going to play this week, guys, but he's an aging running back. He's got knee problems and rib problems. I think they're going to be down a lot in this game, which in your mind you're thinking Forte's a pass catcher that could set up for a juicy PPR game from him, but Bilal Powell, his backup, is also a very good pass catcher. I think we could see more of him, especially if this game starts to get out of hand. Who on the Jets do you guys like? Obviously, you have to play Marshall. Quincy Enunwa, to me, is becoming a must-play, even though he's a little banged up. Who on the Jets stands out to you besides those guys? Or would those be the only two? Or I guess maybe you're even probably forcing Forte in if you have him, Stokes.
I do like Bilal Powell. He seems to get in the game when they're in an obvious pass situation over Forte. But Marshall, you would play no matter what because he's got an advantage over just about every corner. I'm obviously not going to play Fitzpatrick, but yeah, I like Enunwa because he's as far as DFS is concerned, he's a lower priced wide receiver and he does get the volume. And when you look at Eric Decker being out, he should likely get more targets. So I would say that Marshall or Bilal Powell, along with Enunwa, would be the guys I would choose to use on the Jets' offense.
I know this is going to be controversial considering he's thrown 10 interceptions the last 2 weeks. I kind of like Fitz this week from the standpoint of the Steelers' secondary is not very good, and the Jets are going to need to score points this game to have a prayer of even keeping it interesting. And I think the Jets can score points. I know Fitz has been god-awful, but I think Fitz, even if it's Blake Bortles from last year, like, gets a couple touchdown passes this week. He might throw in a couple interceptions also, but Enunwa and Marshall have some big size on the outside. They brought in Austin Seferian-Jenkins, who gives them something over the middle, I guess. Forte and Powell are good pass catchers. I have a feeling about Fitz this week. I think maybe I'm not thinking the Jets are going to win this game, obviously, but I think Fitz could have one of those 300 yards, 2 touchdown, 2 interception, classic Ryan Fitzpatrick games where Fantasy wise, it looks like he did pretty well, even though when you're watching the game, you're like, this guy is erratic. Hadley, am I nuts for thinking Fitz is a not bad play this week?
No, that's actually one of my other hot takes. I like Fitzpatrick. I think Marshall is one of the best options on the board at wide receiver this week. Steelers are definitely better against the run than they are the pass. Fitzpatrick's price, with those two pathetic performances, has just, plummeted. Like it's pretty much as low as you're going to get in the non-Case Keenum territory for a starting quarterback. Like 6,900 on FanDuel and 5,100 on DraftKings is, Landry Jones, the backup quarterback for Pittsburgh, is $5,000 on DraftKings, and Ryan Fitzpatrick is 5,100. This is a guy that, we saw it last year with these weapons. Now, yeah, he's missing Decker, but you know what? Enunwa looks pretty good, actually. So, and he sounds like he's going to be in. I know he had a nagging injury there, but look, he played two of the tougher defenses in the league the last 2 weeks. That 6 picks thing's a little overblown if you actually look at what was happening there. He was still, taking deep shots, trying to make something happen. And, the rest of the team kind of quit in that game. So if you go back to his Buffalo game, he put up 374 yards, and Buffalo is starting to look like a competent defense now. So, Fitz could go for 300 yards here and 2 touchdowns. And especially on DraftKings, you're only penalized 1 point for the interception. You get a 300-yard bonus. And, if he gets you 300 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 pick, even 2 picks, he's almost minimum priced here.
Stokes, any final thoughts on this game or any thoughts on what we're saying about Fitzpatrick?
He'll always have a place in my heart. He will never have a place in my lineup.
Nice. Well said. Guys, let's move on to the late games, and we're going to start off in Denver as the Atlanta Falcons, fresh off of a 300-yard Julio Jones performance, traveled to Denver. I'm going to make a hot take. Julio Jones is not going to get 300 yards this week. Put it on the board, as Matthew Berry would say. To take on the Denver Broncos, Paxton Lynch looks like he's in line to get his first start of the season. Came in last week in relief of Trevor Siemian, who left with an injury. And for the Atlanta Falcons, this isn't an injury, but keep an eye on Tevin Coleman. He has the sickle cell trait, which doesn't jive well with the mile-high altitude in Denver. So he's going to play. It can be a scary situation if you look into it, so it's just something to keep in mind with Tevin Coleman. Not that he'd be a guy that would be in your lineup, but he's been productive at times this year, but I'd probably stay away from him this week. Hadley, what are your overall thoughts on this matchup?
Yeah, definitely stay away from Tevin Coleman. I believe Ryan Clark had the same condition, longtime Pittsburgh safety, and he missed a lot of the Pittsburgh-Denver games in Denver. So, they say they're going to give it a go with Coleman, but he might take a couple carries and they might decide, it's not working. So, and for that very reason, at a somewhat discounted price, I do like Devonta Freeman. Or Devontae, I should say. He's producing, even in a timeshare. He's put up a couple good games here. His price actually was 5,800 against New Orleans. That's when he blew up, right? Mm-hmm. It for some reason went down the next week to 5,500. He put up a respectable 14.4 against Carolina, and now it's down to 5,000. Denver's a really good defense, but they're particularly good against the pass. They're not super special against the run. So I like Freeman in this game. If you're bold, you could throw Julio out there. Obviously, Denver's just killing everyone on the pass. I think I saw that they're allowing 170 pass yards a game, which is just ridiculous in this era, right? But Julio was literally not even mentioned in the ownership post for Fantasy Aces, which means on that site he was 1% or less owned. The guy just went for 300 yards, but people are so afraid of the Denver defense that they're literally not even playing him. So shit, if you can get Julio Jones after the week he just had at like less than 5%, I don't know. It's definitely interesting.
And if you're listening and you're wondering, Hadley's obviously talking about daily. If Julio's in your season long, you're playing him, obviously. He's talking about the value you're getting for daily. I also am going to echo what Hadley says about Freeman. I think he's very good value. I think the reason why he was cheaper coming off of the game against New Orleans is that was a Monday night game, and the prices had already been set for the next week prior to that game kicking off. Stokes, what do you do with Denver? You have Paxton Lynch starting. Thomas and Sanders had finally started finding their groove. You might be playing a little bit of Russian roulette, though, with which one of these guys is going to draw Desmond Trufant, because he has been fantastic this season. He put Brandon Cooks in a box on that Monday night game where tons of points were scored. What do you do with the receivers in Denver knowing that Paxton Lynch is starting this game?
I don't think I would even roll the dice. They're similarly priced for good reason, because it's a toss-up who's going to be the guy that week. And with Lynch making his first start, the game plan is probably not going to be to toss the ball all over the yard, even though he might luck into it anyway because of how they're so terrible. But at the same time, you don't want to be on the losing end of this coin flip. So I would just avoid them both and just say, well, because 1 week it could be Demaryius Thomas who's taken over, and the next week it could be Emmanuel Sanders. Although Demaryius has been more consistent over the course of the season than Emmanuel Sanders usually gets the bigger plays. So I would not use either.
I think C.J. Anderson is obviously a must-start in season. I think he's interesting for daily. Not sure where his price is at, but he's a volume guy. This isn't a great run defense, and he is going to get the carries. And especially with Paxton Lynch getting his first start, I expect a big C.J. Anderson day. Hadley, what about the quarterback on the other side of the field? And I'm thinking even more so season-long than daily. What do you do with Matt Ryan if you're a guy that in season-long he has been carrying your team through the first 4 weeks? Been maybe arguably the NFL MVP through the first 4 weeks, but now he goes to Denver to take on the Broncos. Are you looking for a different option? And where would you draw the line, say, of, okay, now I've reached the point of ridiculousness. I'm not going to sub in Joe Flacco just to get Matt Ryan out. Where's your line of ridiculousness where you still throw Ryan out there?
Yeah, that's a good one. Because, I definitely would still start Matt Ryan over Joe Flacco this week. But, and maybe it's a hot take again, but Matt Ryan's 31, I think. I don't think he's all of a sudden become the best quarterback in the NFL. I think he's feasted on some delicious matchups so far. I mean, he's played pretty much all the worst pass defenses that you're going to see, from the dumpster fire in New Orleans to, my team here in Tampa Bay, and Oakland as well has been pretty bad, although they're getting better. They have trouble with faster receivers for sure. So, I mean, yeah, it depends what you have available to you. I mean, you threw out Joe Flacco, definitely still going Matt Ryan there, but if you have something better, I would consider it. Despite what he's put up this year, it's still Denver, and like I brought up earlier, I believe the number is 170 passing yards allowed per game. Like, that's terrifying.
A guy you liked earlier, Ryan Fitzpatrick. Who would you start between him and Matt Ryan?
Ooh, I'm definitely going Fitzpatrick in daily because of the price savings and stuff like that. But in season long, I don't know if you can swallow that pill. I will say that one of the stats brought up or one of the matchups rather brought up by PFF is they do have a really high grade. I believe Schrader. I'm not sure how you say that guy's name, but the right tackle for the Falcons. He's the fourth highest graded right tackle, 83.2 grade overall, which is really good. I mean, once you're at 70, you're like an above average player, and like I said, fourth highest graded. So he's going to be drawing the beast known as Von Miller. So it's going to be interesting to see how the pass pro holds up for Atlanta. They've been a decent offensive line. They're certainly creating space for the running backs to do work. And they're ranked 8th overall on PFF right now if you look at their offensive line rankings. So if they give them time, I mean, he could probably put up a respectable game. I can't bench him for Ryan Fitzpatrick in season long, I guess, is my final answer with a long-winded route to get there.
Stokes, I know you're a big fan of the Denver defense. What do you do with Matt Ryan this week, both in daily and in season long?
In DFS, I am not going to start him at all. I think that he can chuck it up to Julio if he got the time, and he could do some crazy things against that defense, but I don't think I would take that gamble. In season long, I would think that if I had Matt Ryan on my team, it's because I drafted him as my second quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
So it would really depend on who the other quarterback is that I had. If they're on bye, obviously start Matt Ryan. But over a guy like Fitzpatrick, I'd start him over Fitzpatrick. I'd start him over Cousins. I'd start him over Flacco. But I would start Brian Hoyer over Matt Ryan.
Interesting.
That's close. I want to throw out there too as well that Aqib Talib is probably going to be the guy tasked with trying to shut down Julio Jones, and
Talib gambled a lot, so he could get beat.
Yeah, he gambles, but he gets up for the big games, I feel, as well. And he's actually ranked as the number 6 corner right now on PFF with a 85.9 grade. Julio, obviously, I mean, number 1 wide receiver, which makes sense, right? He's at 89.9, so it's gonna be an interesting matchup. And I'm sure, it's not like Sanu. First of all, Sanu I don't think is fully healthy, and secondly, like, he's not really scaring the defense. They're going to be rolling coverage Julio's way, but if he, like I said earlier about the ownership percentage, that might be somewhere you want to take a shot, especially if you have a lot of lineups.
All right, quick answer from both of you. Start with you, Stokes. Paxton Lynch, worth a flyer in daily?
Yes.
Hadley?
Not if you don't have a lot of lineups.
Okay. Just one of those where, like, okay, I have 10 lineups. I'm kind of bored by looking at all these guys, so let's just throw Lynch in there and see what happens.
Yeah, Atlanta has a bad pass defense. Trufant's a good guy, but the rest are trash. They can't rush the passer either, so.
All right, let's talk about the Dallas Cowboys hosting the Cincinnati Bengals and what's going to be a very interesting game. No Tyler Eifert this week. Looked like he may have been on track to play, but then had a setback in the middle of the week. Dez Bryant for the Cowboys also not expected to suit up in this one. Stokes, any initial thoughts on this matchup?
For some reason, I like Dak Prescott. I think that he plays the position pretty well, and he's consistent. His passing, he throws short, or he has these guys that he can use in the short situations like Cole Beasley and Bryce Butler. But I think that I would use Dak in a situation if I wanted to go cheap on a quarterback, because he is cheap, I believe, on both sides. And I would also use Zeke. I think that the offensive line is he's gonna get better as the season goes, and he's already playing very well. So at the beginning of the season, you thought maybe Alfred Morris would take a few carries from him, and he is getting a few. But I think that Zeke is overall a great option for the Cowboys. So other than that, I mean, I would go with I'd throw AJ Green out there because he's spectacular. And he's matchup proof, in my opinion.
He's very matchup proof. I'm going to disagree with you on Dak Prescott only from the standpoint of Dez is out, and he's piled up numbers the last couple of weeks, but he's done so against the Bears and the Niners. I don't think I'd be even in what could be an okay matchup without Dez out there. This feels to me like a big Zeke Elliott game. And for Zeke Elliott, they just got to stop vulturing his touchdowns at the goal line. He's the NFL leading rusher right now. I think he has a couple touchdowns on the year, but had quite a few taken away from him. I think that Bears game, he had 2 or 3 at the goal line just ripped away from him from random running backs. It's almost like they were just taunting us. Hadley, what are your initial thoughts on this game?
Yeah, it's interesting because Zeke Elliott's actually not doing too well when people get hands on him. He only has 5 broken tackles all year. I believe that's last. and PFF has given him the second worst elusiveness rating. And the only guy that was worse was our friend in Chicago, Langford. So Cincinnati's run defense, it wasn't too bad to begin with. You saw Denver actually go to the air to beat them there, where Simeon put up the 4 touchdowns. And now Vontez Burfict, I believe that's how you say his name. He's back, and he's probably their best defensive player. So Zeke, I think it's a fade this week. I mean, he's not going to be that high owned, I don't think. But you look at the price tag and you look at the matchup, it's actually not great. So AJ Green's in play for sure, though.
And then finally on this game, what do you do with Jeremy Hill and Giovanni Bernard? Is it as simple as saying in standard you play Hill and in PPR you play Bernard? What do you think, Stokes?
I think that Jeremy Hill, I think you could get away with playing Jeremy Hill in both. Jeremy Hill gets a lot of the carries. He's going to get all the goal line carries you'd expect. And I don't think this game is going to get out of hand either way. So I think that his 17 to 20 touches are going to be more or less guaranteed. And Gio, I don't like Gio. I mean, he got that bunch of garbage pass catches, receptions, and a touchdown versus the Steelers. But overall, I don't think he's all that good.
All right, well, we're at the hour and 10-minute mark, so we have a few more games to get through, so we're going to speed it up just a little bit. But one final thought from me on this game, just like I said about Carson Wentz earlier, I think this is a possibility where Dak Prescott has a comeback-to-earth game. I think they're both very good players, but rookie quarterbacks now with 4 games on tape, I think it's realistic to expect that a couple of good defenses, especially in this case with Cincinnati and Marvin Lewis, could have something cooked up for him that he hasn't seen. Without Dez Bryant, I could see the Cowboys struggling. The Buffalo Bills travel to Los Angeles to take on the Rams this week, and LaShawn McCoy got a hand injury on Friday, but he told ESPN that he's planning on playing. The Bills are healthy this game with the exception of Sammy Watkins not playing. Charles Clay is also questionable, but he is going to play. The Rams are banged up on the defensive side of the ball, and it's noteworthy because potentially 3 of their starting defensive linemen, Robert Quinn, Michael Brockers, and William Hayes, all look questionable, even closer to doubtful to play this game. William Hayes is almost assuredly out. Robert Quinn and Michael Brockers, neither one even practiced on Friday, and the Rams promoted a defensive lineman from their practice squad on Saturday, so that's a sign that they're going to need some help there. They do have some okay depth there, but the strength of this team is on their defensive line, so that could be good news for LaShawn McCoy and the Bills. Hadley, overall, what are your thoughts on this matchup?
Fade everyone in daily except the defenses, potentially the kickers on FanDuel. Definitely play LaShawn McCoy in your season long unless you somehow. I'm just gonna definitely play him in season long, but yeah, no plays in daily. I've heard some talk about Todd Gurley. I can't go there until I see something from him. He's getting hit in the backfield almost every run. So,
Stokes, what are your initial thoughts on this matchup?
I'm in on Shady. He's guaranteed 20 or more touches a game, and a lot of it via the pass. So I'm in for Shady. That's about it. I'm not using Tyrod Taylor as much as I love him, but the only person I would use in this game is Shady. I would not use Gurley either.
Season long, obviously you drafted Gurley.
Season long, I'm going to use Gurley because he was my number 1 or 2 pick, whatever. So of course I'm going to use Gurley in season long as well as Shady, but that is completely it. I'm not going to use Tyrod at all in season long. In Case Keenum, you should just cut him if you have him on your team.
I love both these defenses this week. I like the Bills' defense actually a little better than the Rams. I think Taylor protects the ball. He'll even, he'll err on the side of not throwing interceptions. And I'm concerned about the Rams' defensive line in this game, guys. I like Shady McCoy because, I know Aaron Donald is a beast, but he can't do it by himself. Robert Quinn and and Hayes would be a big loss for that team. And then Brocker's also in the middle. That'd be huge for the Rams defense to be missing those guys. McCoy is solid when he's not getting carries. He's had 17, 18, 19, and 20 carries this year. He's also had averaged more than 4 receptions a game, so he's involved in the passing game. I think that number could actually creep up a little higher now as they start to settle into this new Anthony Lynn offense in life after Sammy Watkins, because he is on injured reserve. The one thing about McCoy is he's been pretty touchdown heavy this season. He's got 4 in 4 games, 3 rushing, 1 reception. He's not really a touchdown heavy player throughout his career. He had a couple years in Philadelphia where he was, but for the most part in this Buffalo offense, I don't expect him to be a workhorse touchdown scorer. So I think you can probably expect those numbers to level off a little bit and slow down, but he's going to be involved. He's the best athlete they have on offense, and they're going to keep him involved running and passing. Gurley. If you drafted him in the first round, I apologize. He's been very frustrating. Do not touch him in daily like Stokes and Hadley said. I know the numbers on the Bills are that they give up a lot of points to running backs, but they're getting their best defensive player back this week in Marcel Darius. And they really had one terrible game against Matt Forte, and the rest of the games they've been great. So that Forte game could be an outlier where he had 3 touchdowns. I mean, that's skewing it all in one direction. So really the Bills have been solid against running backs since then. Todd Gurley. You watch guys that break down film on him, and he doesn't look right to me. Obviously, his offensive line is terrible. There's not a lot of holes there, but he's not even showing initial burst. I don't know if it's hesitancy to get through those holes or if it's the fact that defenses are creeping up and there's just no holes there, but something doesn't look right. He obviously has tremendous talent, but to me, I'm getting bad vibes on Todd Gurley and the entire Rams offense. I know the Rams are 3-1, but people that really smartly break down teams still aren't sold on them as far as the grades you'll see. Maybe Hadley has something on DVOA on the Rams, but I don't know, Hadley. What do you think about these Rams?
Oh my God, that offensive line is just atrocious. Basically here's the number that you need to know. On average, okay, Todd Gurley is getting 0.3 yards before coming into a contact with a defender. So he's moving about a foot on a carry, and he already has a defender in his face. So, I mean, what do you expect him to do? I think we saw last year he's supremely talented, but he's having to do it all by himself out there. So
you just hope for his career he's not the next Steven Jackson, who's a tremendous talent that wastes his career away on a team that doesn't know how to put anything around him, and they run him into a brick wall 20 times a game, and by the time he's 28, he can barely move. You hope that's not the case because the guy is tremendously talented. But I think our thoughts on this game are avoid most of the Rams, avoid all the Rams, play Gurley in season long if you have them. One more guy I want to talk about, Brian Quick. He's been somewhat interesting this year. Kenny Britt looks like he's going to play. That's disappointing for guys that maybe liked Brian Quick. Is there anything there, Hadley, as far as a cheap DFS player, or are you just saying no?
Nah, I think the Bills' corners and defense in general is starting to bounce back. The only thing I will say just in general about this game, you guys obviously are both Bills fans, but look out for a letdown spot here, right? Like 2 games in a row that they won that everyone was kind of against them, and now traveling cross-country to L.A. could be another W for those terrible Rams.
Could be. Now, the Jeff Fisher rule does apply. He's an 8-8 coach, and he's 3-1, so getting kind of scary.
Jeff Fisher rule in play, indeed. Yeah, we need a ding for that.
Stokes, any final thoughts on this game, or we just need to move on from this ugly defensive battle?
In season-long PPR, I would start Robert Woods. I like the way he's being used with Sammy gone, and yeah.
Charles Clay, interesting as a guy to keep an eye on at tight end. He has not been that involved, but I think over the course of the season, as they adjust to life after Sammy, I think Charles Clay could become more involved. He started splitting out as a wide receiver last week, so that's just something to keep in mind. Don't force him into your lineup this week. Under any
still a nagging knee injury, though. I see he's still questionable on the injury report, so you don't like seeing that.
Well, the thing about that is he doesn't even practice on Wednesdays, so they pretty much are going to list him as questionable all season long, but I don't think it's going to be something where he doesn't play. It's going to be somewhat like Alshon Jeffrey. He's always going to be questionable, but unless it gets worse, he's probably going to play. Let's talk about a game where there should be plenty of points. Just in the same state, just a little bit different looking teams. The San Diego Chargers travel to Oakland to take on the Raiders. The big story on this game is Latavius Murray is out, which means DeAndre Washington should get the start, with Jalen Richard being the supporting back. For the Chargers, Jason Verrett is out, and that is a huge loss. He has been a fantastic cornerback throughout the beginning of his career. He started getting torched in the Indy game, and that was a sign that he might not be right. And shortly after that, after he got torched by T.Y. Hilton, he did come up on the injury report. He's not going to play, so that is good news for the Raiders receivers, Crabtree and Cooper, as well as Derek Carr. Antonio Gates is back this week, which pretty much makes their tight end situation something I would avoid altogether. And that's it for the injuries on this game. Hadley, what are your thoughts overall on this game?
Play everyone that you can. I want to throw like a little bit of shade on Melvin Gordon, because 45% of Melvin Gordon's fantasy points are touchdowns this year, which is obviously unsustainable. And he's only got 20% of his runs that have gone for 5 yards or more. So like he's just not being efficient with carries, and he's lucking into the end zone. So I'm more looking at the passing attack on both sides. You gotta love Phillip Rivers and Derek Carr in this game. One like slight concern that you might want to take into account, I'm seeing right now that the open for the over-under was 52.5, and 83% of the action was on the over, and yet we have the over-under down to 51 now. So it came down 1.5, even though everyone was on the over. So
the smarts are on the under, I guess?
That's what that would indicate, right? So
Interesting. Stokes, I know you're a Melvin Gordon fan. The numbers aren't there from a yards per carry perspective, and like Hadley said, he's touchdown dependent, but you can't argue with the fact that he's basically all they have at running back. The volume is going to be there. Woodhead's out. Brandon Oliver's out. So he's going to get opportunities, and at this point in time, at this point in the season, with all the running back injuries, sometimes that's all you can ask for.
Yeah, I think the guaranteed touches is enough to warrant him being used, and I think the Oakland defense is not that good against the run, so I could see myself easily using Melvin Gordon. I know his price point has jumped up because of the touchdowns and the points he's getting. So, at this point, you're questioning maybe if you want to pay for what he's going to get, considering he is so touchdown dependent, and the fact that he's not doing a good job running the ball overall. But it's hard to pass up that amount of touches that you're going to be guaranteed to your running back. So obviously you're going to start him in season long, and as well as Cooper, as had said, pretty much everyone. I don't like that Hunter Henry or that Gates is playing, because I like Hunter Henry, but it is what it is.
I'm intrigued by Gates, not necessarily this game. I want to see him get his feet back under him. But when you look at Rivers, he lost Woodhead, he lost Keenan Allen, he lost Stevie Johnson in training camp. And you look at it, and it's just, he's got guys like Travis Benjamin, Tyrell Williams, Dontrell Inman, Melvin Gordon out there. I could see a situation where once Antonio Gates gets back, if he does get back healthy, where Rivers leans on him because of the familiarity there and the trust. I think with him coming back this week, I would just avoid Henry and Gates. If I had to play a Chargers receiver at this point, I'd probably play Travis Benjamin, because he's had 4 or so catches. I think he has had 4 catches in all the games this season, and he has home run potential. Tyrell Williams and Dontrell Inman have kind of traded off games of being somewhat relevant. DeAndre Washington, Hadley, he's a guy that I don't know what his price is on daily, but I imagine he's going to be in quite a bit of lineups.
Yeah, he's basically minimum priced. DraftKings, the minimum's like $3K, and he's at 3,400. And on FanDuel, I believe, give me a sec here, I think he's actually the absolute minimum. Okay, he's 200 above. So the minimum on FanDuel is 4,500, and he's at 4,700, which it gives you like a lot of opportunity to get those higher priced guys in there. But do we really want a guy? He was already trending on Thursday, the Fantasy Aces GPPs that I talked about earlier. He was up in the 26% range. And that was with David Johnson in the player pool, who also represented 26%. Like, man, who knows? With how cheap he is, I feel everyone might throw him in there. And do we really think this guy's a lock for success? He's definitely going to get some carries, but they like Jalen Richard there too. So, the ownership is probably taking me off him.
And let's talk about the Raiders receivers here, guys, for a second, because everybody wants to talk about Amari Cooper and how tremendous of a talent he is. But if you look at the statistics, Michael Crabtree has been arguably as good, if not better, than Cooper so far through their tenure as partners in crime as being receivers 1A and 1B. Who do you like better as not only this week, but going forward for the rest of this season as the Raiders' top receiver? I'll start with you, Stokes.
I think that Amari Cooper is the better. He's the more talented player, I think. But no, I would go with Cooper because I think talent's going to win out, and I think that Derek Carr is going to develop a better rapport with Cooper over the course of the year, and they're it. They're the two biggest cogs in Raiders' future, so I think that Cooper will be the guy.
Do you agree with that, Hadley?
I mean, it's tough to argue that Cooper is not the more talented one, but for whatever reason, it's Crabtree that's getting the looks that you want, the red zone looks. He's the one hauling in the touchdowns. And here's the thing. Despite all that, we have Cooper at the higher price tag, even though it's always Crabtree that's producing more. And somehow, I would have thought that Crabtree would be up there in ownership. He's representing 9.2% in the Fantasy Aces GVP, whereas Cooper's all the way up at 15. So, are people not getting it? Crabtree's the one getting the red zone look, so I'll be on Crabtree again.
We've talked about the receivers, talked about the running backs. Is there anybody else in this game that we haven't mentioned? Is there a Raiders tight end you want to throw in there? Anybody that you guys can think of before we move on?
No, leave the defenses alone.
Yeah, I definitely don't play the defenses. I think on DraftKings, maybe go. We did bring these guys up, but maybe take the price savings and go with Tyrell Williams over Tyrus Benjamin because there's a big price discrepancy on DraftKings between the two. And then on FanDuel, you can go whichever one you want because they're both 6,500. So.
Sounds good. Let's go to the Sunday night game when all of America will be watching Donald Trump debate Hillary Clinton. We have the New York Giants traveling to Lambeau Field to take on the Green Bay Packers. No Rashad Jennings again this week. And for the Packers, Sam Shields is out and Demarius Randall is questionable with a groin injury, which could mean big things for Sterling Shepard, Odell Beckham, and Victor Cruz. And Jared Cook, the tight end for the Packers, is also out this week. Stokes, what are your thoughts on this game?
I like Odell Beckham a lot. I think that the Giants are going to do what they can to really appease Odell Beckham to keep his head in the game. I think they're going to feed him early and often. I can see him going for a huge game. So by that token, as I said, I like Odell Beckham. I don't like Eli though. I think that same thing could be Eli's undoing because I think they're going to try and force feed Odell Beckham. I think he's going to get his stats, but I don't think Eli's going to have a great game. Aaron Rodgers, I do like him in this game. I think that coming off the bye, the Packers are going to be better prepared. I think their offense is going to get back to where they should have been. And as far as season long is concerned, you're starting Odell Beckham, you're starting Jordy, you're starting Rodgers, you may not start Cobb, but the other guys you're going to be starting.
Shepard, yeah. Hadley, what do you make of the Giants running back situation? It seems like Darkwa is going to be the main primary ball carrier, but Bobby Rainey might be the guy you want to take a look at, especially in this game where the Giants could be throwing a lot.
Yeah, I mean, ideally you don't want to take either of these guys, right? I mean, if you're stuck, it's probably Rainey in PPR and Darkwa in standard scoring, right? Eli, what I'd say, and something I would recommend for everyone, see what happens when the player props come out later this morning, I guess, technically, right? So see what they think. I mean, Eli's been putting up yardage, and so has Beckham, but they're just not finding the end zone a lot. So if he gets the yardage and touchdowns this week, like, he could go off. I mean, Matthew Stafford certainly had himself a day last we saw Green Bay in action. So
from the Odell Beckham standpoint, it just feels like that big game is coming. Now we're getting kind of late into the year here. We're only in week 5, but if it doesn't come soon, then you're really going to start to wonder if this is a big problem with Beckham. But I'm kind of with Stokes. I'm feeling maybe, especially under the lights, this is a big spot for them. If Beckham has another stinker and makes another ass out of himself on TV, this could be the beginning of the end for this relationship between Eli and Odell. But I think he's going to have a good game in this spot, especially with Shields out and Randall hindered by the groin injury. I love Sterling Shepard in this matchup. It seems like Manning has already built some real trust with him, and he seems to almost look to Shepard on bigger downs than Beckham at this point, which is great as far as Shepard owners go. Cruz has some juice left in his legs. He's not going to put up the 80, 90, 100 catch seasons like he had before, but looks like a very useful weapon for the Giants offense. I don't think I'd start either of these defenses if I had to. Maybe the Packers, but not with the cornerbacks out. This to me looks like a good old-fashioned shootout. And just to piggyback on the point we made before, Stokes, you don't like Manning this week. Would you play Manning or Matt Ryan?
I'd play Manning because of the defenses.
All right. Any final thoughts on this matchup, Hadley?
I agree with Eli over Matt Ryan this week. And one thing that you'll like is it's only a slight line movement, but it is down from 7.5 to an even 7, even though 61% of the action is on Green Bay. So a little reverse line movement there on that game. So maybe New York actually keeps it a little bit closer, which you'll like. It should be a shootout.
Interesting spot for the Giants. Start 2-0, lost the last 2 games, and now they're in Lambeau, which is never an easy spot, especially under the lights of national television. So we'll see what the Giants can do this week, if they can get back on track, or if they're going to fall to a disappointing 2-3. And then finally, the last game of the week, Monday Night Football. Just like we drew it up, Derek Anderson going against Jameis Winston. No Doug Martin, no Charles Sims. It's going to be Jacquizz Rodgers getting the start for Tampa Bay. This is a mess. Tampa Bay has injuries on the defensive side of the ball. I don't think Gerald McCoy is going to play. They're down their top 2 running backs. Derek Anderson starting at quarterback for Carolina. Stokes, what do you think about this game? Are you going to watch?
I'm going to watch because I am an avid football fan, but I'm going to watch begrudgingly, mostly. This is just bad, really and truly. I mean, maybe you want to watch Luke Kuechly play? I don't know.
Well, from a fantasy standpoint, I think Derek Anderson is a little intriguing, especially from the DFS point of view, because Tampa Bay's defense has been so horrendous and it's not like he doesn't have weapons out there. He has Kelvin Benjamin, he has Greg Olsen. You expect the Panthers are going to be able to move the ball on Tampa. Hadley, do you like Derek Anderson this week?
Yeah, I mean, Tampa stinks. Like, here's the thing. Obviously, first of all, he's not available on the main slates and daily to begin with. But let's say you're playing, like, the primetime slate, right? Like Sunday night and Monday night. Everyone goes in on the Sunday night game, which, you should, considering the game that it is. But if you want to maybe pivot, Eli and Aaron Rodgers are going to represent the vast majority of ownership there. Derek Anderson put up decent numbers 2 years ago. He started both games against the Bucs, completed 70% of his passes in one game, 62.5 in the other game. He had 230 yards and 2 touchdowns, and then he had 277 in a touchdown. No picks in either game, and some Greg Olsen love. He finished as tight end 1 in one of those matchups with Derek Anderson against the Bucs, and tight end number 2 overall. So Greg Olsen is still in play, and we saw a little bit last week. I mean, the game was sort of getting out of hand, but Carolina sort of still had a chance at Atlanta, and Derek Anderson put up numbers. I mean, 73.9% and 2 touchdowns, and then at the end, of course, he threw the 2 picks to finally seal it. But he put up numbers first.
And Stokes, on the other side of the field, we saw last week what Matt Ryan and Julio Jones did to this Panthers defense, and they cut a cornerback this week. So do you consider Jameis Winston? If Mike Evans is on your season long, yes, you're playing him. But what do you think about Winston this week? Is he interesting, or are you not going there?
I wouldn't be going there with Winston. I would be going there with Mike Evans, though. I think that he provides a big matchup problem with those guys, and I would expect him to have a really good game. But I wouldn't trust Jameis Winston over other guys of similar price point.
Hadley, what do you do with the Carolina running backs?
I mean, you hope to God that you don't have to play one of those guys right now. Yeah, I like Mike Evans this week too. The only week that he didn't get double-digit targets was week 1, and he still had 5 catches for 99 yards and a touchdown. He has a touchdown in every game except that Denver game, which, we covered Denver earlier. Mike Evans is really playing well. And again, if you're doing that Sunday-Monday slate, that's where maybe you can consider Jameis Winston. And maybe, Mike Evans might go under-owned in that slate because, like I said, people like to cram home that Sunday night game and see what their score is, the first night. So.
All right. Well, any final thoughts on this matchup or any of the matchups we've talked about so far? Stokes, I'll give it to you. Any final thoughts to wrap up this week number 5 in the NFL?
Golden Tate. Here we go.
How about you, Hadley?
So, I threw shade at myself earlier for an off-season call where I said Murray wasn't going to produce, and here he is. But a pat on the back for Marvin Jones because he's clearly the number 1 receiver now in Detroit, Stokes. So, and one thing I forgot to mention that is good for the Giants in the Packers game, 27.3% of completions going against Green Bay are going for at least 20 yards. So when they are completing passes, they're going for big gains against Green Bay. And like I said, we saw the Matthew Stafford explosion against them. So
sounds good. My final thought for this is get Chris Hogan in your lineup. I think he's going to have a big week this week. He's in both my lineups. He's going to be in my daily lineups. I just have a feeling that Chris Hogan is going to be a guy that Tom Brady looks at early and often in this game. So that is a look at all 13 games, 12 tomorrow, 1 on Monday night. Guys, this was fun. This was about an hour and a half of fantasy talk. It was our first fantasy podcast. I think it went pretty smooth. We will see what happens in the games tomorrow, and we will talk to you next week on our fantasy preview show.